This NBA season, don't let an injury rule out your bet. With Fanatics Fair Play's first-half injury protection, Fanatics Sportsbook keeps your bet in play. Fair Play protects all first-half player props from injuries across every NBA game this season. So make the switch and stay in the game with Fanatics Sportsbook. Winning hits different here. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-522-4700. MD, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. Offer not available in all states. Terms apply. See Fanatics Sportsbook app.
You've got social dialed in. Search is doing its thing. So why do your marketing results look the same as 6 months ago? That's because you're fishing in the same pond as everyone else. Podcast listeners are a different audience entirely. More engaged, harder to reach through traditional channels, and ready to act when someone they trust makes a recommendation. We're Acast, and we put them right in front of you. Browse thousands of the world's leading podcasts, book host reads or run your own ads, and track every conversion in real time. Same skills you already have, brand new results. Acast. Acast.com/advertise.
The term political earthquake gets kind of overused. And what I think is coming in Great Britain isn't so much a political earthquake, as it is a sort of a once in a century end of a political order. It began in 2024 with the slow death of the Conservative Party, which I doubt will restore itself. And it's going to continue in the next couple of years. It's going to, with the death of the Labour Party, and we're going to see in May, in a week or so, a big step forward in that process with the outcomes of the May local elections. What is almost certain to happen is that Labour will lose control of two of the places that it has dominated for, in one case for a century, and the other for around half a century. Wales and London. And after we've heard the intro music and we've probably heard from our sponsors, we're going to dive into why. What is causing this fundamental change? Political orders come to an end. Eventually, they all do. They are based on the material conditions that give birth to them in the first place. And they are either replaced by a new political order that makes some kind of coherent sense to the population, or there is a protracted period of instability and chaos, out of which probably a new political order emerges. The last time that this happened was in the years immediately after the First World War. The Liberal Party had been in ascendancy throughout the pre-war years. It had led the country into the First World War, and then had formed a national government, a coalition with the Conservatives during the war. Who were the Liberal Party? Well, the Liberal Party were the party of kind of new 19th century capital. They were the party of the uh, the new money, the money of industrialists, and the money of the wealth of a new industrial bourgeoisie. They were the party of free trade over protection. They were the party of limited government. They were the party of the idea that this kind of liberal notion of individual rights versus the power of the state, and the right to private life and private property. Crucially, this is the kind of the essence of liberalism. Conservatism in the 19th century went through a number of transitions. It was initially essentially the landowning classes party, and it developed a popular conservatism from the 1860s onwards, when it was clear that the middle classes would have the vote, and to some extent the working classes. So you had to create a kind of a popular patriotic conservatism around the ideas of patriotism and empire. And you had to ensure that, to some extent, the working classes gained some kind of benefit from voting for you. Disraeli understood this. The new liberalism of the 1890s into the early 1900s understood that, again, unless there is social reform, what you'll get is a party of the working class. And new liberalism tacks to the left in order to take initiative away from the emergent Labour Party. And a great deal of pretty good social reform that occurs before the First World War is the product of the Liberal Party. And you get the irony of people like Winston Churchill becoming leading social reformers of the day. The First World War opens huge tensions in the Liberal Party, the conscription, the size and the power and the role of the state, and also the fact that Lloyd George splits the Liberal Party to take power during the First World War. He combines with the Conservative Party, and the Conservatives are very mindful that Lloyd George, this wily character, would be quite happy to split the Conservatives too and leave the husks of the Liberals and the Tories to one side and form his new National Party. And they oust him. He's, by 1922, quite a sort of an isolated figure at the head of a national government, which is largely conservative, and and then they essentially oust him. And after that, you kind of, in the 1924 general election, you have the first Labour minority government, which is partly brought down by the Liberals. The late Labour is reliant on the Liberals. And you have, by 1929, when you get your second Labour government, it's clear that a two-horse race, a two-party system has emerged, and 1945 cements this when you have Labour and the Conservatives. Why do you have this? Because you have the rise of a mass working class electorate, and the various economic, social, and political pressures on the two-party system mean that over time, particularly by the time you get to 1945, most politics has to tack to some extent to the left. And in order to win a general election after 1945, the Conservatives accept this by about 1947. That you will have to accept union power, you'll have to accept a commitment to full employment, you'll have to accept that there will be a large and well-funded welfare state, and a whole range of other things that are normally anathemas to the Tories. we are now at the far end historically of a long cycle, and the destructiveness of Thatcherism has a huge part to play in this. From the late 70s onwards, this neoliberal moment that deindustrialized the country, broke union power, left working class communities atomized, isolated, poorer, everyone kind of poorer really, except an elite few, has given rise to all sorts of crises. And the key markers are the financial crisis of 2008, Brexit 8 years later, and the destruction of the Corbyn movement in the Labour Party. And of course, we must mention, of course, austerity from 2010 onwards. Um, the the combination of all of these things is as follows, really. So, firstly, essentially economic assumptions that Thatcherism was built on blew up in 2008. There was some inchoate kind of nationalist explosion of resentment, wildly counterproductive, obviously, in 2016, that essentially smashed Britain's kind of neoliberal role in the world as this sort of key part of kind of the overall globalization project. Many pundits argue that kind of globalization is fragmenting at that point. Britain is its kind of transatlantic link between Washington and Brussels. It begins to sort of decay at that point. And Britain has never really, post Brexit, ever worked out what it is supposed to be doing. Then there is this merciless austerity that's killed hundreds of thousands of people, led to the decay of communities up and down the land, the collapse in public services, and the idea that Britain is essentially de-developing as a nation. Then, when you have an anti-austerity movement emerge within the Labour Party, the Labour right, who are essentially Tories by any other name, mercilessly destroy it, leaving us with this kind of centrist technocrat, Keir Starmer, who is, for all his blandness, happy enough to engage in supporting Israel's genocide in Gaza. The kind of icon of the professional managerial class who kind of don't want to engage in anything political or ideological. They want just a safe pair of hands at the wheel that will make the system work as it should do. Well, this system's completely broken and will never work again. And that is the great realization that really kind of eludes large parts of the voting population. You have all those things, and the idea that any kind of meaningful change can come from the Labour Party ever again has largely evaporated, thus polarising the British electorate between now a kind of five-party split, and Nigel Farage's Reform Party, this kind of Orbanist, Trumpist, proto-fascist kind of organisation, private company, which it is, stands to benefit, but so too does the Green Party. So let's look at both of those groups, those parties, one by one. The Reform Party, funded in large part by the reclusive Bitcoin billionaire Christopher Harbon, who is a resident of Thailand, who has given huge sums to Reform. Reform has their own kind of propaganda channel in the guise of GB News, owned again by the billionaire Paul Marshall, who also owns The Spectator. And it's evident that Reform is this kind of neo-Thatcherite, Enoch Powellite vehicle for opening up what kind of remains of Britain to the extremes of vulture capitalism, and using kind of populist racism really as the kind of like the battering ram. People with that kind of money don't care one way or another the ethnic composition of the country that they are seeking to dominate, but they are the kind of evidence that um, certain factions of capitalism have now almost completely captured the state. And this is another kind of phase of that coup d'etat. Um, Farage has done very well since the 2024 general election, where they secured a number of seats in Parliament. And the reason why he's done very well is because of the conscious and deliberate retreat of the Labour Party from any kind of notion of social democracy. What the Labour Party has sort of refashioned itself as is a kind of a simulacra of the right wing of the Democrat Party in America. It's a party beholden to finance that sort of talks in broadly kind of liberal terms in some regards, is actually more than willing to wade into culture wars on the side of reaction. You look at Wes Streeting and trans rights, or his attack on trans rights. You look at the openly kind of Enoch Powellite racist rhetoric, Island of Strangers under Keir Starmer, and their plans to, under sort of Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, looking to kind of out-Tory the Tories on persecuting asylum seekers, on making life for people claiming asylum, or even life for people seeking to seeking more kind of regular forms of immigration into the UK much more difficult and costly and painful. And it was the whole point was to kind of play to a racist xenophobic base, which Farage has already captured. You know, the people that are up and down the land who obsess about immigration and are openly racist. They already have a party. They don't, you know, there's no point in trying to kind of canvass for their votes. So the problem here is that none of that for Labour has worked. Labour has tried to tack to the right. There was a kind of a sort of like a faction within the Labour Party, Blue Labour, that hoped that that Starmer could be forced to kind of tack to the right, kind of, as they put it euphemistically, culturally, you know, to be more more kind of representative of some kind of imagined parochial working class that existed perhaps in the 1950s, but tacked to the left in terms of economics, you know, protectionism, union rights, a high wage economy, that kind of thing. Well, Starmer has done the former, but not the latter. Starmer was ultimately beholden to a form of kind of vulture capital in the guise of private equity. The people that he's been spending his time having chats with have been large companies, large private equity companies like BlackRock, and the version of capitalism that Starmer, the model, if it can be called that Starmer.
Here's a tip for you. There's a podcast out there with fans waiting to be your next customer. They tune in every week, they trust the host, and that host wants to talk about brands like yours in their own words to their audience. The problem is, you just haven't been introduced yet. We're Acast, where that introduction happens. As the world's largest podcast marketplace, we let you browse shows, see who's listening, and book host-read sponsorships or run your own ads, all from one platform. Transparent pricing, real-time data, complete control. Start advertising on podcasts by visiting acast.com/advertise.
Believes in, and again, belief needs to be kind of taken with giant inverted commas, is a sort of an idea that's kind of ridiculous from the outset, the idea that by essentially handing the functionings of state all the way down to the workings of local authorities and the operation of care homes and um, this kind of thing, prisons, young offenders institutes, water treatment plants, whatever, to private equity, which is there really to find an easy mark to suck capital out of. That this will somehow rejuvenate public services and living standards in Great Britain. That as a result of this kind of free market magic, and we're not talking about free markets, we're talking about people trying to capture assets. It's quite the opposite. It's a sort of kind of corporate neo-feudalism. That somehow this will resolve the questions that the British state has failed to, like how do we provide 21st century type services on a kind of a comparative shoestring? And the answer is you can't. Um, on the other side, Starmer has gleefully told the left within the Labour Party to pack its bags and leave, and it did do, and it went and it found a home in the Greens. Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, their project Europarty is pretty much dead on arrival, and so the prospect for the left vote being split is less and less likely. The Green Party was able to resist the attack by the Labour Party in the Gorton and Denton by-election, claiming that that vote for Green would let reform in. People don't buy that anymore. They tried it at the Caerphilly by-election, where they said, a vote for Plaid Cymru, the Welsh Nationalist Party, fairly, by the way, for those that don't really know, kind of progressive Welsh nationalism. These are kind of quasi-fascistic nationalism of reform. A vote for Plaid Cymru would let reform in, and again, it didn't do. People voted Plaid and got Plaid. In Gorton and Denton, people voted Green and got Green. And this is a big threat to Labour. The key electoral strategy that they were going to use was that we may be utterly dreadful and have no redeeming features, but we're not Farage. And if you're not careful, you'll get him. The reason for adopting this attitude instead of, say, for example, doing things to improve people's living standards is because the Labour operation really is an operation of kind of triangulation. So it's about giving enough of a kind of a minor sop to just enough voters to get you over the line, whilst really enacting policies that are wildly unpopular, such as the maintenance of privatised water. Even Tories, even Reform voters, believe that water should be in public hands completely, wholesale. There are Conservatives and even Reform voters that believe that the Royal Mail should not have been privatised and should be in public hands. Margaret Thatcher didn't believe in nationalising and privatising the Royal Mail because it had the Queen's head on it. You can't go flogging that off to the markets. There were certain places where, in this kind of tug of war between the traditional conservative values of the skepticism of radicalism and conserving of the institutions of state, that won out against this desire for kind of extreme market liberalisation, which ultimately just leads to kind of new oligarchies emerging anyway. So it's all a bit of an expensive waste of time. So Starmer himself, his epic political incompetence and naivety, and his dishonesty. Starmer, was claimed to be the kind of like the more acceptable face of Corbyn, and would when he took over from Jeremy Corbyn, claimed he would keep policies that the membership liked, anti-austerity, renationalisation of utilities, that kind of thing, and then kind of almost quite gleefully broke every single one. It seemed to be rather.
We know life is busy. That's why saving money should be effortless. With Atlantic Union Bank's Roundup Savings, every time you use your debit card, your purchase rounds up to the nearest dollar and automatically goes into savings. So whether you're grabbing coffee, filling the tank, or picking up groceries, you're saving without even thinking about it. It's just one of the ways Atlantic Union Bank makes managing your money easy. Learn more at atlanticunionbank.com or stop by a branch today. Atlantic Union Bank. Any way you bank.
Do you keep hearing podcast ads, like this one, for example, but always wonder how you actually get involved with them for your own brand or organization? Well, it's easier than you think. We're Acast, and we give you the platform to do it all yourself. Browse thousands of popular podcasts, choose the shows that match your perfect audience, set your budget, and launch. And if you want a hand, our podcast specialists are there to help you launch with confidence. This is podcast advertising without barriers. Get started at acast.com/advertise.
Enjoying himself when he did. And his support of Israel, kind of his wholehearted support of Israel, going far beyond virtually, even going far beyond anything Margaret Thatcher would have done, indeed did do, and she indicates this kind of absolute capture, really, of Labour Party politics by the group within the Labour Party, the Labour Friends of Israel, who have this opaquely funded organisation that has given huge bungs of cash to almost every Labour luminary going. So there is on the left and the right almost no reason to vote for the Labour Party. Now, if it were just the fact that you have this incompetent, dislikable, dishonest man in the guise of Keir Starmer, his removal would surely fix all of this. Well, I don't think so. There is there's a hope that Andy Burnham, who is a more centre-left figure, if he is installed once Starmer's being removed after the May election disaster, that this will somehow stem the tide. I don't think so. Firstly, I don't think that the Labour right will tolerate Burnham or allow him anywhere near Downing Street. And secondly, even if that did happen, what does one do to arrest this decline? How do you retool Labour that has now spent since Blair, 30 years on this drift to the right? Longer, really, even if you go back to Kinnock. How do you kind of arrest that? Well, it's virtually impossible. Once you've had several generations within a political party all agreeing on the same consensus that market logic is the special source that will address the problems of state and society, and that instead of a kind of a broad social democracy where financialization and PFI, private finance initiative, and other forms of privatization, and an increasingly fragmented state, an increasingly atomized society, all of those things need to be fundamentally addressed, where the climate crisis needs to be fundamentally addressed, where industry needs to be onshored, where the kind of obsequious worship of Atlanticism needs to be nipped in the bud. All of these things require not just some kind of revolution within the party. I mean, Corbyn tried that and was destroyed by it. It requires a new party, and it's about, if you imagine taking the values of a brand like McDonald's and saying, well, we can just do vegan food now. I mean, it would be impossible. It'd be laughable. And the Labour Party itself has not just drifted here over time, but arguably in its roots, it was always, as they say on the title of the book, not just not a socialist party, but a party with some socialists in it, and those socialists are no longer, for the most part, either in it or have any influence over it. Which is why when you have a new left party like the Greens, which hasn't been tainted, and hopefully won't be tainted by donations from private capital, which is in no way beholden to the tabloid press. I mean, this is another huge feature of the Labour Party's downfall. Every single time it had the opportunity to do something about the right-wing press, which hates the Labour Party and celebrates its destruction, it didn't do it. It attempted for short-term gain to kind of cozy up to Rupert Murdoch, which is a fool's game. It really is. Every single time they didn't take that opportunity, and now they have an almost entirely hostile media landscape, which is bad, but their own fault. So coming back to the central argument here, we're facing this kind of, I think, epic historical realignment with a dead Tory party and probably a decaying, if not dying, Labour Party. And we face the prospect in the next 10 years, 20 years, of a world without both, where they're confined to the margins, they're sort of minimal players. Does that mean a new two-party system will establish itself between Reform and the Greens? Maybe. And if you have a Green Party in power, you'll have a significant chunk of the country that feels like it's almost under some kind of enemy occupation. And similarly, if you have a Reform Party in power, that's how progressive voters of their various stripes will feel. This is a party, kind of like a party of elderly, nostalgic Thatcherites, a kind of mishmash of kind of racists, but also people that actually don't hold probably any of those views. There are people who vote Reform who aren't racist. There are people who vote Reform who don't like Mrs. Thatcher. There are people who vote Reform because they look at their high streets and they're like war zones or wildernesses. And there are people who vote Reform who have been relentlessly bombarded with the propaganda from the right-wing press that this is all down to immigration. Well, it's not. It's down to 5 decades of an economic project, which has kind of died and shuffles along in some kind of zombie afterlife. And that is the thing that has killed our two political parties. It is the neoliberalism they both embraced, the economic outcomes and social outcomes and the contradictions therein have created crises that both parties are incapable of addressing because they're incapable of considering any other economic or political philosophy. And so they have to embrace this kind of rapacious sort of post-2008 version of neoliberalism, which isn't even the kind of free marketeering that Thatcher advocated. It's simply an oligarchic capitalism, a rent-extracting oligarchic capitalism that can do nothing other than impoverish a significant portion of the population and make the well-to-do year on year that bit more insecure. So when a political class fails to, not just once, not just twice, but for about 15 to 20 years non-stop, fails to address a single question or grievance, and in fact makes things significantly worse, it's hardly surprising that we are in this sort of moment where the old political order is about to be taken out to a field and put out of its misery. And I mean that metaphorically, not in any real sense, before you write in or get onto the anti-terror police. So, yeah, let's see. I think May will tell us an awful lot. But if you're listening from overseas, I wonder if there are parallels with where you are in the world. Because this model of economics has been applied virtually everywhere with similar, if not even worse, results. So let me know. I'd be interested to know. Anyway, take care, everybody. All the best. Bye-bye. And I'm moving everything from the Patreon over to the Substack for all sorts of horrendous, long-winded reasons. But, and then eventually, hopefully, we're going to run the kind of the membership-y sort of thing from the website itself. But Substacks are kind of like an intermediate solution. So I've written a little essay about all this on Substack today, so you can check it out. Take care, dudes. All the best. Bye-bye.
Ever walk past a place for rent and wish you could just take a peek inside? Maybe even explore the layout. Envision the natural light streaming through the windows. Or plan where your vinyl record collection would go. At Apartments.com, you can. With tools like their 3D virtual tours, you can see the exact unit you could be living in. Really envision yourself in your new home with Apartments.com, the place to find a place.
Hey, I just Venmo'd you for rent.
Nice. Now I can instantly spend it whether I'm checking out online with Venmo or using a Venmo debit card.
Say more.
More exactly. Because the more you do with Venmo, the more you get. Like earning up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash on a bundle of brands.
So, order more pizza.
The math demands it.
Get the Venmo debit card.
Venmo Stash bundle terms and exclusions apply. See terms at venmo.me/stash terms. Venmo checkout not available at all merchants. Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.